much, my political batch of 2020, Senator Renuka Sagram Sugla. Let's give her a round of applause. Indeed, my political batch. First time I heard the term, and I will always remember it. Beautiful people of the new constituency of St. Joseph, Aranguez or Aranguez St. Joseph, Aranguez St. Joseph. Let us welcome our newly appointed Prime Minister, the Honorable Stuart Young, to your beautiful constituency. My cabinet and parliamentary colleague, your member of parliament, my brother Terence Dial Singh, thank you for your warm and gracious welcome to your beautiful constituency. Members of parliament, members of the cabinet, I see members of the executive of this constituency, members of council, PNM family, PNM well-wishers, our matriarch in the party, Mrs. Joan Yule Williams, who is always in every party, in every single part of this country. Let us welcome her. Again, her welcome is always, and her presence rather, is always welcome in all our political battles and our political meetings all over Trinidad and Tobago. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, and wherever you are listening to this beautiful broadcast here in St. Joseph, welcome again to the PNM family and this great political meeting as we start our political battle to return and to maintain good order and good governance in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. But I also want to recognize and congratulate our good friend who your next member of parliament for Tabakit, Miss Marissa Alvarado, good PNM stock, and she will be your next member of parliament because a couple days ago they called out 18 candidates and they left out the constituency of Tabakit. Poor Anita. She labored in the vineyard for the last 4 and 5 years. She has nowhere to go. She is not welcome in the UNC anymore. Perhaps we should welcome her in the PNM. Pick up your burden, come to the PNM and find political rest, because the UNC is now a place for criminals and vagabonds. You are no longer welcome in that political party, but as you take your exit out of the UNC, we will put a PNM candidate in the young person of Ms. Alvarado to represent your interests in the constituency of Tabakit. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank and first start by thanking the Honorable Prime Minister for reposing his trust and confidence in appointing me your Minister of National Security. I do recognize, Honorable Prime Minister, and you, PNM family, that this is a serious responsibility that has been placed upon my shoulder. And every single day that I live, with your encouragement and the encouragement of all of my colleagues in the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago, and every good upstanding citizen in Trinidad and Tobago, we will return law and order in every community in our beautiful country. Because you see, the criminal element, they are just a minor percentage of this population. This is a population of 1.4 million people, and we ought not to be held ransom by a group of vagabonds whose only alternative, despite our plans and programs that we would have put in place to give our young people a fighting chance, their only hope is to take a gun and run rampage on innocent citizens in this country. We deserve better. We will push back. We will fight back. Every single citizen under this government, we will push them. We will drive them out, because we deserve better in this country. We deserve better in this country. You go back to the history of the PNM, especially when we resumed government in 2015. Look at how much resources we would have given to all law enforcement agencies in this country. Look at the amount of legislation that we pass in Parliament to equip our law enforcement officials with the legislative capacity to prosecute crime and to prosecute criminals in this country. You would have seen time and time again when we brought legislation in the Parliament, it was obstruction after obstruction after obstruction, because those opposed to us believe that the only way that they can re-enter the corridors of power in Trinidad and Tobago is to undermine every crime-fighting initiative that's been launched by this PNM government. Because they believe that if crime remains a front-burner problem in this country, you PNM people, you the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, will turn your backs on the PNM and put criminals back into power to deal with crime. It cannot happen, ladies and gentlemen. It ought not to happen, ladies and gentlemen. It ought not to happen. But as we stand believing that the capacity of our law enforcement agencies, despite the challenges, we will unite in battle with them. We will give them the support that they require. We will root out corruption in all our law enforcement agencies, because the vast majority of them, they want a safer Trinidad and Tobago. And we as PNM standard bearers, we will work with them. We will provide them with all of the resources, and we will push back against criminals in this country, because we deserve better. Ladies and gentlemen, Minister Hines has led this ministry for the last 4 years. It is not an easy chalice to drink from. He has been criticized over and over again, and he has not been recognized for the great work and the great public service that he has given to his constituency and to this country in the Ministry of National Security. He has been vilified. He has been criticized almost for every murder and every kidnapping in this country. But it is not an easy battle, because as we sat in cabinet week after week, we provided him with the support, and we provided him with the resources, and we provided him with the moral support as he led a very difficult ministry. And today, here in St. Joseph, we want to say thank you, Minister Hines, and thanks to your family for your public service in Trinidad and Tobago. And we look forward to you continuing to work with us as we seek to return law and order in Trinidad and Tobago. Ladies and gentlemen, it was in December last year, the government, in another attempt to keep crime under control, a state of emergency was called in this country. You are aware of that? A state of emergency. It is an initiative and it is an intervention that no government would take pleasure to institute in any country to return law and order in our country. But we had to do it because of the information that was available to our law enforcement officials, who came to us at the National Security Council and asked us to declare the state of emergency so that they can have the upper hand on the criminals. Today, ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you that since the calling of this state of emergency, despite what others may want to tell you, and despite our dissatisfaction with the level of crime in Trinidad and Tobago, we and the police service would have witnessed a 30% reduction in the murder rate in this country, and this ought to be commended. 30% reduction in our murder rate up to this point in time. Is it at a place where we are comfortable? Of course not, because one murder is too much. One murder is too much in this country. But a 30% reduction means that more lives we have to give a fighting chance to our young people so that they can turn away from their life of crime. The police also reported, ladies and gentlemen, that over 165 firearms were confiscated. You can just imagine what 165 firearms would have done to our young boys and our young girls in communities all over. This is 165 firearms that were confiscated and removed from our streets so that our police service can provide safety to our families, provide safety for our children, provide safety for our communities. 446 kilograms of marijuana was seized and persons prosecuted. 3.4 kilograms of cocaine removed and confiscated. 22,148 mobile patrols were instituted all over Trinidad and Tobago to give you a sense of safety in your communities. 1,473 patrols, foot patrols instituted, and 14,837 traffic operations instituted all over Trinidad and Tobago. And it is for that reason we would have seen an incremental reduction in criminal activity and a reduction in the murder rate in Trinidad and Tobago. But it is not at a place where we are satisfied. We believe that much more needs to be done to arrive at a place where we are satisfied, where all of our communities will feel that sense of safety wherever they are. That our schools can be a place of learning wherever you are in Trinidad and Tobago. Our hospitals and other public places will not be havens for criminals in Trinidad and Tobago. The work is a tall order. But if we, as Renuka would have said, regardless of wherever we are in this country, regardless of whatever community group that you're involved in, whether we are involved in our churches, whether we are involved in law enforcement, wherever we are, as parliamentarians, as elected members of parliament, putting our differences aside and doing what we must do, ladies and gentlemen, it is the only way in which we can return Trinidad and Tobago to a safe place. It is the only way. Ladies and gentlemen, shortly after our Prime Minister was appointed, he instructed me as the new Minister of National Security to call all of the heads of our law enforcement agencies at the Ministry of National Security and to get briefing from them. I summoned the head of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, the Chief of Defense Staff, the head of our prison service, the head of our intelligence gathering agencies, and they fully brought me up to speed where we are in our crime fighting efforts. And as we do that, the Honorable Prime Minister, as chair of the National Security Council, summon all of the heads of our law enforcement agencies, including the commanding officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, the commanding officer of the regiment, the commanding officer of the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force Reserve, the head of our fire services, the chief of defense staff, the head of our intelligence agencies, and they reported to the National Security Council, the newly put together National Security Council, on where we are in our crime fighting efforts, because we understand what this is doing to our country, the damage it is doing to our economy, the damage it is doing to the psyche of our people. And they brought us up to speed with what they are doing, especially as we approach the end of our state of emergency. It was a very encouraging meeting. It was an eye-opener in some respects, but we took comfort that what they are doing, that they are on the right track. And we promise that we are going to provide them with the necessary resources so that they can continue to push back against crime in this country. You would be shocked to know that in our prisons, when we take some of the criminals off the streets, take them out and uproot them out of our communities, and we lock them up in the prison, many of the murders are called from inside the walls of the prison. Because many of the criminals are interacting and interfacing with criminals on the outside. And you have to ask yourself, when you confiscate drugs and you confiscate mobile phones in the morning, by the evening, they return to the prisons so that those criminals can continue wreaking havoc on our people. In this regard, we would have given the head of the prison service the undertaking that we will do everything possible to eradicate all of the illegal activities in our prison, so that when we lock up the murderers and we lock up the gun carriers, they will not order their hits on innocent citizens in Trinidad and Tobago. We will root out corruption, and we will root out the crime-fighting efforts that is buried in the bowels of our prison. Tonight here in St. Joseph, we want to call upon and we want to give the assurance to every single prison officer that we will provide you with all of the resources that you require to protect yourselves from all of the criminals inside and outside of the prison. And we will ensure that every gang leader and every criminal that is incarcerated in our prison will not use the prison to wreak havoc on us on the outside. To fight this criminal scourge in this country, the fight is not only on the streets, it is not only in the communities, it is not only in the highways, it is not only on the waters, it must be taken in the walls and within the walls of our prison. And that is the undertaking that we give here today. A very important decision that was taken at our National Security Council. At our National Security Council, they reported that 2 of our Cape-class vessels have finally returned to the waters of Trinidad and Tobago to protect our borders. Let us congratulate Minister Hines. Let us congratulate the leadership of the Ministry of National Security. Let us congratulate and commend the efforts of the government of Trinidad and Tobago for doing everything that they were supposed to do to return 2 of our Cape-class vessels to the waters of Trinidad and Tobago so that they and we can all be protected. And I give you the assurance that not too far from now, 3 new interceptors will also be on the waters of Trinidad and Tobago to secure our borders and the rest of the other vessels. Because, ladies and gentlemen, our waters, that is where the guns and the drugs are coming in, that is creating the problems in this country. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that have been reported to us is that our law enforcement entities and agencies in Trinidad and Tobago must not only enjoy the confidence of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, but they must enjoy the confidence of law enforcement agencies in the region and in the international organization. We cannot fight this battle here alone in this country, because for every murder and for every piece of narcotic that is imported in this country, there is some connection with some other country in South America, in Central America, or in North America. And if international law enforcement agencies do not have the confidence of our local law enforcement officials, they will not share the necessary information with them so that we can take action here in this country to protect the citizens. One of the great benefits coming out of the state of emergencies that has been reported to us at the National Security Council is that local law enforcement officials are now collaborating and coordinating with each other to share intelligence information. And they are reporting that as a result of that, they are seeing an improvement in the detection rate, an improvement in some of the crackdowns that we have been having and the success that we have been having. It is one of the great success coming out of the state of emergencies because they are not operating in silos anymore. They are working together. They are meeting on a weekly basis. They are sharing the necessary information. And that is the reason why we are seeing more success in our prisons and some of the operations that you are seeing taking place on land and on sea. But we have to do much more because our international law enforcement agencies must have the confidence that our local law enforcement officials have the capacity to receive intelligence information so that they can engage in operations on the streets and on the waters. I can tell you that over the next 3 months, when you re-elect the PNM into government on the 28th of April, we will ensure that our local law enforcement officials maintain the confidence of their regional and international partners so that they can receive information and initiate successful operations in this country. If our international partners do not believe in local law enforcement officials, they will not share pertinent information. This is a very serious matter, ladies and gentlemen. And I give you the assurance that as a government and as the new government, that we will do what we must so that our international partners will collaborate and coordinate with our local law enforcement agencies so that we can ramp up the efforts against crime and criminality in Trinidad and Tobago. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very serious matter. We understand your control. We understand your concerns. We sympathize with many of our mothers and our fathers who have lost their children to crime. That despite our efforts to provide an alternative way of life under the Ministry of Youth Development, under the Ministry of Education, under the Ministry of Sports, that our young boys and young girls, too many of them, are resorting to a life of crime. And we will ensure in the Ministry of National Security that our local law enforcement agencies are equipped, they are resourced, so that we can push back against the criminals that are wreaking havoc in our country. But I want to tell you this, because this is an election. And if, God forbid, the people of this country put these other people who are posing as a political organization into office, do you think that our international partners will want to collaborate and share critical information with them? Can you imagine Anil Roberts as your next Minister of National Security? Can you imagine Khadija Double Palm Amin being your next Minister of National Security? Can you imagine Barry Pararat as your next Minister of National Security? Can you imagine Kamla Prasad Bisesa, who cannot get up before 1 p.m. after lunch, being your next Prime Minister? After 60-something years, the alternative to the People's National Movement continues to be chaos and confusion, ladies and gentlemen. And I want to give you the assurance that under the leadership of Prime Minister Stuart Young, as we head towards the end of this term, and under his leadership as we move to another term, the issue of crime and security will continue to be at our front burner. But you need to do one thing. Do not just give us 21 seats. Do not just give us 22 seats. We need a constitutional majority to go to the Parliament and make the necessary changes. Change up the Service Commission. Change up the management of the police service. Change up the management of the Defense Force. Change up the management of all of the structures, the judiciary, because these are the changes that we need to make to return Trinidad and Tobago to a place of safety. Do not be fooled. But in order to do that, we can't do it with 21 seats. We can't do it with 22 seats. We can't do it with 23 seats. We need 26 and above to make the kind of changes that we need to make in Trinidad and Tobago. So tonight, as we draw the battle line, right here in RUNG West St. Joseph, we want to send a loud signal to the UNC and all of the PNM detractors that we are not fighting for 22 seats. We are not fighting to scrape through this election. We are fighting to ensure that we get a majority in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago to make the necessary changes in this country, deep as they are, painful as they might be, because that is what is required to straighten out this country once and for all. And with the leadership of the Honorable Stuart Young, the current Prime Minister, and the next Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and all of the people of goodwill in this country, and our next returning members of Parliament, we will do what we must to ensure that Trinidad and Tobago is a safe space and a safe place for all of us, for our children to go to the park, for our children to go to school, for us to walk to our streets, to go to our malls, and to go to our shopping center. It is within our collective capacity, and it can only happen under the People's National Movement. Great is the PNM. Great is the PNM. Great is the PNM, and we shall and we must prevail. My friend.